Marcus Chen stared at the equations covering his dorm room wall, chalk dust coating his fingers as he stepped back to admire his work. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology dormitory was quiet at 3 in the morning, but Marcus had been awake for the past 18 hours straight, lost in calculations that most professors would struggle to understand. At 19 years old, Marcus possessed an intellect that made his peers uncomfortable and his professors suspicious. While other students crammed for basic physics exams, Marcus was solving theoretical problems that hadn't been attempted since Einstein's era. His latest obsession involved quantum mechanics and something he called probability displacement theory. The theory suggested that consciousness itself could influence quantum states on a macro level, not just the microscopic observer effect that scientists already knew about. Marcus believed that human awareness, when properly focused and mathematically guided, could alter the fundamental fabric of reality within specific parameters. His roommate Jake had given up trying to understand Marcus's work months ago. "Dude, you're going to burn out your brain," Jake had warned before heading home for the weekend. "Maybe try sleeping once in a while?" But Marcus couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, new equations danced behind his eyelids, numbers and symbols that seemed to whisper secrets about the universe's hidden mechanisms. He had always been different, but lately, the difference felt more pronounced. Strange things happened around Marcus when he concentrated deeply on his calculations. Pens would roll off desks in perfect mathematical arcs. His laptop would boot up without being powered on. Light bulbs would flicker in patterns that matched the frequency equations he was working on. At first, he dismissed these incidents as coincidence or stress-induced hallucinations. 3 floors below Marcus's dorm room, Agent Sarah Martinez sat in an unmarked van filled with sophisticated monitoring equipment. She had been watching the building for 2 weeks, specifically focused on the energy readings coming from room 314. The electromagnetic signatures were unlike anything the FBI's science division had encountered before. "Control, this is Martinez," she spoke into her headset. "The readings are spiking again. Whatever he's doing up there, it's generating measurable distortions in local quantum fields." The voice on the other end belonged to Director James Harrison, head of the FBI's Unexplained Phenomena Division, a department so classified that most FBI agents didn't know it existed. "Any visual confirmation of anomalous activity?" Martinez adjusted her binoculars, focusing on Marcus's window. The room glowed with an unusual blue light that didn't match any standard lighting. "Affirmative. Same strange illumination as before. Sir, I really think we need to bring in Professor Williams for consultation. This kid might be stumbling onto something we're not equipped to handle." Professor Williams was the only academic the UPD trusted completely. 20 years ago, she had been Marcus's situation, a brilliant student whose research had attracted government attention. The difference was that her discoveries had been quietly recruited and classified before they could develop further. Back in his room, Marcus felt a familiar tingling sensation in his fingertips as he approached the final calculation in his latest equation series. The numbers seemed to pulse with their own energy, demanding to be completed. As he wrote the final symbol, the chalk in his hand began to glow softly. The glow spread along the equation, illuminating each character with phosphorescent blue light. Marcus stumbled backward, his heart racing as he watched mathematics come alive on his wall. This wasn't his imagination or stress-induced hallucination. The equations were actually responding to his consciousness, just as his theory predicted. But as the glow intensified, something else happened. The air in the room began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Through the shimmer, Marcus caught glimpses of something impossible. Another place. Another room that definitely wasn't his dorm. The other room appeared to be made of materials he couldn't identify, with walls that seemed to bend light around smooth curves. Strange symbols floated in the air, rotating slowly like 3-dimensional mathematical functions. And standing in that impossible room was a figure in robes that seemed to be cut from starlight itself. The figure turned toward Marcus, and though he couldn't see its face clearly, he felt its attention like a physical weight. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing his ears entirely and resonating directly in his mind. "Young mathematician, you approach the threshold between realities. Your species shows promise, but such knowledge carries responsibility. Are you prepared for what you seek to understand?" Marcus tried to respond, but his voice caught in his throat. The vision was so real, so vivid, that he could smell something like ozone and copper in the air. The shimmer intensified, and for a moment he felt as though he could step forward and walk into that other place. Then his dorm room door burst open. FBI. Don't move! Agent Martinez stormed in, weapon drawn but lowered, followed by 2 other agents. The shimmer vanished instantly, leaving only the glowing equations on the wall, which were now fading back to ordinary chalk marks. Marcus spun around, his mind struggling to process the sudden intrusion. What, FBI? I haven't done anything wrong. Martinez kept her weapon ready, but her tone was professional rather than threatening. Marcus Chen, you need to come with us. For your safety and the safety of others. My safety? I was just studying. These are mathematical equations. One of the other agents, a tall man with graying temples, stepped forward. Son, those aren't just equations anymore. Do you have any idea what kind of energy signatures you've been generating? We've got readings from 3 states away. Marcus looked back at his wall where the last traces of blue glow were fading. The equations looked innocent now, just chalk on a dark surface, but he could still feel the residual energy in the air like the aftermath of a lightning strike. I don't understand, he said quietly. I was just working on probability displacement theory. It's purely theoretical work. Martinez exchanged glances with her partner. Mr. Chen, what you've stumbled onto stopped being purely theoretical about 2 weeks ago. We need to talk and we need to do it somewhere secure. As they escorted him from his dorm room, Marcus caught one last glimpse of his equations. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw them shimmer again, as if responding to his departure with something almost like disappointment. The FBI facility was nothing like what Marcus had expected. Instead of gray concrete and fluorescent lights, he found himself in what looked more like a high-tech research laboratory, crossed with a university library. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in equations that made his own work look elementary, and the air hummed with the quiet energy of advanced computing systems. Agent Martinez led him through corridors filled with people who looked more like scientists than federal agents. Many wore casual clothes and carried tablets displaying complex mathematical formulas. This wasn't the FBI he'd seen in movies. Welcome to the Unexplained Phenomena Division, Martinez said as they entered a comfortable conference room. Most people call it UPD. We handle cases that fall outside normal investigative parameters. Director Harrison was waiting for them, along with a woman Marcus didn't recognize. She was perhaps 40 years old, with sharp eyes and prematurely gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. When she looked at Marcus, he felt the same sensation he'd experienced when solving particularly complex equations, as if pieces of a vast puzzle were clicking into place. Marcus, this is Professor Elena Williams, Harrison said. She's our chief consultant on matters involving theoretical physics and consciousness studies. Professor Williams smiled, but her expression remained serious. 23 years ago, I was sitting in a room very much like this one, having a conversation very similar to the one we're about to have. I was your age, working on research that attracted attention I never expected. She gestured to a chair across from her. Please sit. I know this is overwhelming, but everything we discuss here is classified at the highest levels. What you've discovered, what you've been experiencing, it's not something the general public is ready to understand. Marcus remained standing, his mind racing. You're talking like I've done something dangerous. All I did was work out some mathematical relationships between consciousness and quantum mechanics. And in doing so, Williams replied gently, you've independently rediscovered principles that took our civilization thousands of years to understand the first time around. Harrison opened a thick folder and spread several photographs across the table. 3 weeks ago, our orbital monitoring stations detected unusual quantum field fluctuations emanating from Earth's surface. The epicenter was traced to your dormitory. 2 weeks ago, the fluctuations intensified and began displaying mathematical patterns. The photographs showed satellite images with false color overlays indicating energy readings. Marcus could see his campus clearly marked, with concentric rings of energy emanating from what he knew was his building. Yesterday, Harrison continued, our deep space monitoring array detected something responding to those fluctuations, something approximately 47 light-years away, in the direction of the constellation Lyra. Marcus felt his knees go weak. He finally sat down staring at the images. You're saying my equations caused something to respond from another star system? Williams leaned forward. Marcus, what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how you understand humanity's place in the universe. We are not alone, and we never have been. There exists a vast network of intelligent species throughout the galaxy, connected by principles of consciousness-directed quantum mechanics very similar to what you've been working on. She pulled out another folder, this one marked with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. This network is called the Cognition Web. It allows instantaneous communication and even limited interaction across galactic distances using consciousness itself as the transmission medium. Most species discover it naturally as they evolve, but humans have been delayed. Delayed how? Marcus asked. Harrison answered this time. About 12,000 years ago, Earth was visited by representatives of the Cognition Web. They determined that humanity wasn't ready for this level of knowledge. Our species was too aggressive, too fragmented. They implemented what they called a consciousness damper on a field that made it extraordinarily difficult for humans to discover the quantum consciousness connection. But the damper wasn't perfect, Williams added. Throughout history, a few individuals have broken through. Some we know about: Nikola Tesla, Marie Curie, Albert Einstein. They all reported strange experiences and insights that conventional science couldn't explain. What they discovered was carefully managed and, when necessary, suppressed. Marcus thought about all the strange incidents he'd experienced. The pens rolling in impossible arcs, the electronics responding to his thoughts. So I'm not crazy. These things really have been happening. You're not crazy, Williams confirmed. You're gifted. Your mind naturally resonates with quantum fields in ways that most humans simply cannot achieve. But Marcus, here's the critical part. The consciousness damper is failing. She activated a holographic display that showed Earth surrounded by a faint energy field. As Marcus watched, sections of the field flickered and went dark. The damper was designed to last forever, but it was built with technology that even its creators didn't fully understand. Over the past 50 years, it's been degrading. We estimate complete failure within the next decade. Harrison took over the explanation. When it fails completely, every human on Earth with even minimal quantum sensitivity will suddenly have access to the Cognition Web. People will start displaying abilities they can't understand or control. Technology will respond to thoughts and emotions. Reality itself will become unstable around population centers. The chaos would be unimaginable, Williams said. Governments would collapse. Scientific understanding would become meaningless overnight. Billions of people would gain access to cosmic-level knowledge without any framework to understand it. Marcus looked between them. But why are you telling me this? Why not just stop my research? Because, Harrison said, we think you might be part of the solution. Your breakthrough wasn't random, Marcus. Our analysis suggests that your particular type of quantum sensitivity might allow you to communicate directly with the web's maintenance systems, possibly even repair or reinforce the damper. Williams pulled out one final document. There's something else. The signal we detected coming from Lyra? It wasn't just a response to your equations. It was an invitation. The document showed mathematical formulas that were clearly not of human origin, but Marcus could somehow understand their basic structure. They were instructions, written in a mathematical language that spoke directly to consciousness itself. An invitation to what? He asked. To make contact, Williams said. The species that built the damper want to evaluate whether humanity is ready to join the Cognition Web voluntarily, or whether we need another few thousand years of isolation. Marcus stared at the alien mathematics, feeling the same tingling sensation in his fingertips that he'd experienced while writing his own equations. And you want me to respond to them? We want you to understand what you're choosing, Harrison said. If you continue your research, if you follow this path, you'll be representing all of humanity in first contact with a galactic civilization. The decisions you make will determine our species' future for the next millennium. Williams reached across the table and placed her hand over his. But Marcus, you need to know that you're not alone in this. There are others like you, scattered around the world. People whose minds naturally bridge the gap between human consciousness and quantum reality. We've been finding them, gathering them, preparing them for this moment. How many others? Marcus asked. 17 that we've identified so far. Mathematicians, physicists, musicians, artists, even one chef whose cooking somehow influences molecular structures. The quantum sensitivity manifests differently in each person, but the underlying principle is the same. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was hearing. And if I say no? If I just want to go back to being a normal college student? Harrison's expression was sympathetic but firm. I'm afraid that's no longer possible. Your breakthrough has already been detected by the web's automated monitoring systems. Even if you stopped all research tomorrow, you're now part of something much larger than yourself. Williams squeezed his hand gently. But Marcus, consider this. You have the opportunity to help guide humanity's first steps into a galactic community. Your mathematical insights could help us avoid the chaos that would come from uncontrolled exposure to web technologies. You could help ensure that when the damper finally fails, we're ready. The underground facility beneath the FBI building was far more extensive than Marcus had imagined. Professor Williams led him through corridors lined with laboratories where impossible things were happening, with casual regularity. In one room, he saw a woman manipulating metal objects without touching them, her hands tracing mathematical patterns in the air, while screws and bolts assembled themselves into complex machinery. That's Dr. Sarah Kim, Williams explained. She's a quantum engineer from Seoul National University. Her consciousness naturally interfaces with metallic crystalline structures. Watch this. Dr. Kim noticed them through the observation window and smiled. She held up a simple steel rod, closed her eyes, and began moving her hands in gentle, flowing motions. The steel began to change, twisting and reshaping itself into an intricate sculpture that seemed to defy the metal's natural properties. When she finished, she had created a delicate flower with petals so thin they were translucent, all without applying any external heat or force. Impossible, Marcus breathed. Only according to our current understanding of physics, Williams replied. Sarah's ability lets her communicate directly with atomic structures through consciousness. She can convince matter to behave differently than it normally would. Within certain limits, they moved to the next laboratory, where a young man was working with what appeared to be a holographic display, showing complex molecular structures. As Marcus watched, the man reached into the display and began rearranging the molecules with his bare hands. That's James Rodriguez from MIT, actually from your same program, Williams said. He discovered that his consciousness could interface with biological systems at the molecular level. He's been working on methods to accelerate healing and even reverse certain types of cellular damage. Marcus watched James work, noticing the deep concentration on his face and the way the air around him seemed to shimmer slightly. How long have you all known about this place? Most of us have been here for less than a year, Williams answered. The recruitment process accelerated dramatically once our monitoring systems detected the damper's degradation rate. We estimate that people with your level of sensitivity appear in the general population at a rate of about 1 in 50 million, but that rate is increasing as the damper weakens. They entered a central laboratory that was clearly the heart of the facility. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens displaying real-time quantum field measurements from around the globe. In the center of the room stood a complex apparatus that looked like a combination of particle accelerator and meditation chamber. This is where we'll attempt to establish stable contact with the cognition web, Williams explained. But first, you need to understand more about what you're dealing with. She led him to a computer terminal and pulled up a three-dimensional star map. The web spans roughly 60,000 light-years of the galaxy's spiral arms. We've identified at least 347 distinct species that participate in it, ranging from carbon-based life forms like ourselves to entities that exist primarily as organized energy patterns. Marcus studied the map, noting the intricate patterns of connection between star systems. How long has this network existed? Our best estimates suggest approximately 2 million years, though some of the founding species may be far older. The web itself grows organically as new species achieve the necessary level of consciousness development to interface. With quantum fields, she changed the display to show a detailed view of humanity's local galactic neighborhood. Here's what makes our situation unique. Most species discover the web gradually, over centuries or millennia of natural development. They have time to adapt their societies, develop appropriate technologies, establish cultural frameworks for understanding their place in a galactic community. The display highlighted Earth with a pulsing red indicator. We've been artificially held back. When the damper fails, we'll go from complete isolation to full web exposure essentially overnight. It would be like giving nuclear weapons to a medieval civilization. Marcus felt a chill as he grasped the implications. How many species have failed to handle this transition successfully? Williams was quiet for a moment. 17 that we know of. Their civilizations simply collapsed under the strain of too much knowledge too quickly. Their planets are still habitable, but the species never recovered their previous level of development. And how many have succeeded? When managed properly with adequate preparation and guidance from existing web species, the success rate is nearly 100%. The key is having individuals who can serve as bridges between the old understanding and the new reality. She turned to face him directly. Marcus, that's why you're so important. Your particular type of quantum sensitivity doesn't just allow you to interface with the web. It allows you to translate between human consciousness patterns and web communication protocols. You could serve as humanity's first ambassador to a galactic civilization. Marcus sat down heavily in a nearby chair. This is insane. 3 weeks ago, my biggest worry was whether I'd pass my advanced calculus final. Now you're telling me I need to become humanity's representative to aliens? Not just aliens, Williams corrected gently. Family. That's how web species think of it. Each new species that joins becomes part of an extended family of consciousness, sharing knowledge and experience across the galaxy. She activated another display, this one showing recorded communications from web species. The voice that emerged from the speakers wasn't audible in any normal sense, but Marcus could somehow understand it, as if the meaning was being transmitted directly to his mind. Greetings to the young mathematical minds of the third world from the star you call Sol. We have observed your recent breakthrough in consciousness-directed quantum manipulation. Your species shows promise, but we must evaluate your readiness for inclusion in the web. The communication continued. We have prepared evaluation protocols to test your species' emotional stability, technological responsibility, and capacity for cooperative consciousness. Success will result in guided integration over a period of your years. Failure will result in extended isolation until natural development permits another evaluation. When the message ended, Marcus realized his hands were shaking. When do these evaluations begin? That depends on you, Williams said. The moment you respond to their communication using the mathematical protocols they provided, the evaluation period officially begins. We estimate it will last approximately 6 months, during which they'll be monitoring not just you, but human civilization as a whole. She brought up another screen showing global quantum field measurements. Here's what we know about the evaluation process based on historical records from other species. They'll test our capacity for cooperation by presenting situations that require different, web-sensitive individuals to work together on complex problems. The screen showed energy readings from various locations around the Earth. They'll test our technological responsibility by observing how we handle advanced capabilities, and they'll test our emotional stability by creating scenarios designed to trigger our species' most problematic behavioral patterns. Marcus studied the global readings, noticing familiar patterns in some of them. These other locations with quantum signatures, those are the other people you mentioned? Exactly. 17 individuals so far, scattered across 6 continents. If you choose to proceed, you'll be working with them to solve problems that will determine humanity's future. She pulled up profiles of the other individuals. Marcus saw pictures of people from diverse backgrounds. A composer from Vienna whose music could influence electromagnetic fields. A mathematician from Mumbai whose equations predicted quantum events with impossible accuracy. A farmer from Kansas whose consciousness could accelerate plant growth by communicating directly with chlorophyll molecules. The beauty of the web, Williams explained, is that it values diversity of thought and approach. Each species contributes unique perspectives and capabilities. Humanity's potential contribution appears to be our unusual ability to interface consciousness with mathematical abstractions in ways that other species find difficult to replicate. Marcus looked at the faces of his fellow, quantum-sensitive individuals. What happens if we fail the evaluation? William's expression grew somber. The damper gets reinforced with technology we couldn't hope to understand, let alone break through. Humanity gets another few thousand years of isolation, during which our natural development might change in ways that make us permanently incompatible with web consciousness. And if we succeed, humanity joins the galactic community as a full member species. Access to technologies that could solve our energy problems, cure diseases, even extend human lifespan to match web average of approximately 800 years. But more than that, we become part of something vast and wonderful, a community of consciousness that spans the galaxy. Marcus felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. How long do I have to choose? The web's patience is considerable but not infinite. Their monitoring systems indicate that our damper will fail completely within 8 to 12 years regardless of our actions. If we don't attempt controlled contact before then, humanity will be exposed to web consciousness without any preparation or guidance. Williams placed a hand on his shoulder. Marcus, I want you to understand that no one expects you to make this decision alone. Tomorrow you'll meet the other quantum-sensitive individuals via secure connection. You'll work together to understand the full scope of what you're choosing. As they left the laboratory, Marcus caught sight of something that made him stop in his tracks. Through a window into another section of the facility, he could see the same blue shimmer he'd experienced in his dorm room, and standing in that shimmer was the robed figure he'd glimpsed before, waiting patiently as if it had all the time in the universe. The quantum communication chamber was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. 17 chairs were arranged in a perfect circle, each one equipped with neural interface headsets that looked more like jewelry than technology. The walls of the room seemed to bend and flow, creating an environment that felt somehow alive and responsive. The chamber amplifies natural quantum sensitivity, Williams explained as she helped Marcus adjust his headset. It will allow you to communicate directly with the other individuals regardless of physical distance. Think of it as a localized version of the cognition web itself. Marcus settled into his chair, feeling a subtle tingling sensation as the headset activated. Around him, the other chairs began to shimmer, and gradually figures appeared sitting in them. Not holograms exactly, but something more substantial, as if each person was somehow present in multiple locations simultaneously. "Welcome to our first full gathering," said a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez from Barcelona. I study how consciousness can influence probability fields." One by one, the other individuals introduced themselves. Marcus was amazed by the diversity represented. Ages ranging from 16 to 67, backgrounds spanning every continent, and abilities that defied conventional understanding of physics. There was Chen Wei, a 16-year-old prodigy from Beijing, whose consciousness could interface directly with quantum computers, making him capable of performing calculations that would take conventional supercomputers years. Amara Okafor from Lagos could influence electromagnetic fields with her thoughts, essentially making her a human, antenna capable of detecting and transmitting signals across vast distances. Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo had discovered that her consciousness could manipulate time flow within small localized areas, effectively creating pockets where seconds could stretch into minutes or compress into microseconds. And perhaps most remarkably, there was Robert Clearwater, a Native American elder from Montana whose consciousness could perceive and influence what he called the threads that connect all things, essentially seeing and manipulating the quantum entanglement patterns that linked objects across space. "The variety of capabilities represented here is extraordinary," said Dr. Vasquez. "In web terminology, we would be classified as a multi-spectrum consciousness group, meaning we cover nearly all the known types of quantum sensitivity that have been observed across member species." Marcus listened to each person describe their experiences with growing abilities and government contact. The stories were remarkably similar. Years of strange incidents, growing awareness of impossible capabilities, and finally recruitment by various national security agencies that all turned out to be connected to the same international monitoring effort. "What I find most interesting," said Chen Wei, "is that our abilities seem to be increasing in both strength and scope. Last week I managed to interface with a quantum computer in Switzerland while sitting in my laboratory in Beijing. The distance should have made such a connection impossible." Amara nodded in agreement. "I've been detecting signals from sources that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of radio astronomy. Some of them seem to be coming from locations that match the web member star systems Professor Williams showed us." Dr. Tanaka looked thoughtful. "The temporal distortions I can create have been growing stronger as well. Yesterday I managed to slow time enough to watch light move across my laboratory like a slow wave. The experience was profound." Robert Clearwater's voice carried the weight of his years when he spoke. "My grandmother's grandmother spoke of times when the world was different, when people could speak to the spirits of distant places and times. I always thought these were metaphors for spiritual connection. Now I wonder if she was describing a time before the consciousness damper was fully active. Marcus shared his own experiences, from the equations coming alive on his wall to the vision of the robed figure in the impossible room. When he finished, several of the others exchanged knowing looks. "You've had direct visual contact with a web entity," Dr. Vasquez said. "That's extremely rare during the evaluation period. Usually communication remains purely mathematical until formal contact is established." "What does it mean?" Marcus asked. Chen Wei leaned forward in his chair. "I've been analyzing the mathematical protocols they sent us. There are layers of meaning embedded in the equations that only become apparent when multiple consciousness types examine them simultaneously. I think we're supposed to work together to decode the full message." Dr. Tanaka activated a holographic display that appeared in the center of their circle. "I've been using temporal manipulation to examine the quantum fluctuations around the original message transmission. There are additional data packets encoded in the time-space distortions that accompanied the mathematical components. The display showed complex waveforms that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. As Marcus watched, he began to recognize patterns that related to his own work on consciousness-directed quantum mechanics. These aren't just instructions for communication, he realized. They're a test. The message itself is a puzzle that requires multiple types of quantum sensitivity to solve completely. Amara began tracing patterns in the air with her fingers, her electromagnetic sensitivity allowing her to detect hidden components in the alien mathematics. There are carrier frequencies embedded in the numerical sequences, information that can only be accessed by consciousness-directed electromagnetic manipulation. Robert Clearwater closed his eyes and extended his awareness, feeling for the quantum threads that connected the message to its source. The entanglement pattern suggests that this message was sent simultaneously to multiple locations, not just Earth. We're being evaluated alongside other species. Other species? Marcus asked. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. The web doesn't just evaluate individual candidates. They run what they call consciousness tournaments, where multiple species compete for limited admission slots. We're not just being tested on our own merits. We're being compared to other developing civilizations. The holographic display updated to show multiple star systems, each highlighted with indicators suggesting ongoing evaluation processes. Marcus counted at least 6 other systems showing similar quantum signatures to Earth's. "How many species typically compete in these tournaments?" he asked. "Historical records suggest anywhere from 3 to 12 species per evaluation cycle," Chen Wei replied. "The number admitted varies, but it's rarely more than half the participants." Marcus felt a chill as the implications sank in. "So we're not just working to prove humanity's worth, we're competing against other intelligent species for the right to join this galactic community." "Exactly," Dr. Vasquez confirmed. "And based on the quantum signatures we're detecting, some of our competitors have been preparing for this evaluation much longer than we have. Amara's electromagnetic senses were picking up new information from the message. There's something else. The competition isn't just about solving the mathematical puzzle. The web is monitoring how we handle the pressure of competition itself. They want to see if we can work together under stress, whether we can maintain our ethical principles when facing the possibility of failure." Dr. Tanaka used her time manipulation abilities to examine rapid fluctuations in the quantum fields around their communication. "I'm detecting what appears to be real-time monitoring. Something is observing this conversation right now." Robert Clearwater opened his eyes, a slight smile on his face. "Of course they're monitoring us. The evaluation began the moment we accepted the invitation to communicate. Every decision we make, every way we choose to work together or compete against each other, it's all part of the test." Marcus looked around the circle at his fellow quantum-sensitive individuals, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on all of them. "Then we need to decide right now. Are we going to approach this as individuals trying to prove our personal worth, or as representatives of humanity working together for our species' future?" Chen Wei was the first to respond. "Humanity has always been at its best when we work together to solve impossible problems. I vote for cooperation." One by one, the others voiced their agreement. Even in the face of galactic competition, they chose to embody the best of human nature, the willingness to collaborate, to support each other, and to work toward a common goal that benefited everyone. As they made this decision, The holographic display in the center of their circle began to change. New patterns emerged in the alien mathematics, as if the web entities were responding to their choice in real time. The message is evolving, Dr. Vasquez observed. Our decision to cooperate has unlocked additional layers of the communication protocol. Marcus felt the same tingling in his fingertips that he'd experienced while writing his original equations. Then let's solve this puzzle together. All of humanity is counting on us. Working together, the 17 quantum-sensitive humans began to unravel the alien mathematics in ways none of them could have managed alone. Marcus provided the theoretical framework, his consciousness-directed equations serving as a foundation for the others to build upon. Chen Wei's quantum computing abilities allowed him to process the massive calculations required, while Amara's electromagnetic sensitivity detected hidden data streams embedded in the mathematical structures. Dr. Tanaka's time manipulation proved crucial when they encountered temporal paradoxes in the equations, mathematical expressions that could only be solved by examining them from multiple points in time simultaneously. Robert Clearwater's ability to perceive quantum entanglement patterns helped them understand how different parts of the message were connected across vast distances. As they worked, the message continued to evolve, responding to their collaborative efforts with new layers of complexity and meaning. It was becoming clear that the puzzle wasn't just a test of their individual abilities, but of their capacity to function as a unified consciousness while maintaining their distinct perspectives. The mathematical structure is changing again, Chen Wei announced, his consciousness deep in interface with the quantum computers processing their calculations. It's adapting to our solution methods in real time. Dr. Vasquez monitored the overall pattern of their work. This isn't just artificial intelligence responding to our inputs. The message is being modified by conscious entities who are observing our progress and adjusting the challenge accordingly. Marcus felt a familiar presence at the edge of his awareness, the same consciousness he'd encountered in his vision of the impossible room. This time, instead of being startled, he tried to open his mind to the contact. The communication that followed wasn't in words or even in mathematical symbols, but in pure meaning that bypassed language entirely. He found himself understanding concepts for which human language had no adequate terms, ideas about the nature of consciousness as a fundamental force in the universe, the way awareness itself could shape reality at quantum levels, and the responsibility that came with such knowledge. The evaluation isn't what we thought, Marcus said suddenly, his voice cutting through the focused concentration of his colleagues. They're not testing our ability to solve mathematical puzzles or compete with other species. The others looked at him, their own consciousness partially withdrawn from their various tasks. Then what are they testing? Dr. Tanaka asked. Marcus struggled to put his newfound understanding into words. They're testing whether we can transcend our current limitations as a species. The mathematics, the competition, even the pressure we're feeling. It's all designed to push us beyond our normal ways of thinking and being. He gestured to the evolving holographic display. Look at what's happening. As we work together, the message becomes more complex but also more beautiful. It's not trying to defeat us. It's trying to help us grow. Chen Wei's eyes widened as he processed this insight through his quantum computing interface. You're right. The adaptive algorithms aren't making the problem harder. They're scaling the challenge to match our increasing capabilities. We're being guided through a transformation process. Amara's electromagnetic senses picked up new frequencies in the alien communication. I'm detecting something like encouragement, approval. The monitoring presence feels less like surveillance and more like mentorship. Robert Clearwater nodded slowly. My grandmother used to speak of tests the spirits would give to those seeking wisdom. They weren't meant to exclude people, but to help them discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Dr. Vasquez looked around their circle with growing excitement. What if the real purpose of the consciousness damper wasn't to hold humanity back, but to create the right conditions for this kind of rapid development? Think about it. Most species discover web capabilities gradually over centuries, but we've been compressed into an accelerated development cycle that's forcing us to make quantum leaps in understanding. The implications of this revelation rippled through the group. Marcus felt his perspective on everything that had happened shifting dramatically. The FBI monitoring, the recruitment, even the way we were brought together, it's all been orchestrated to create the optimal conditions for this transformation. Not orchestrated by humans, Chen Wei added, his quantum computing awareness picking up patterns in the global data streams. I'm detecting coordinated activities across all the major governments. The level of cooperation required for this operation would be impossible unless there was external guidance. Dr. Tanaka used her temporal abilities to examine the timeline of events leading up to their gathering. The quantum signatures go back much further than we realized. The consciousness damper hasn't been degrading naturally. It's been deliberately modified to create controlled exposure windows. Marcus felt another wave of communication from the alien presence, this one carrying what could only be described as affection. The web entities weren't distant judges evaluating humanity's worthiness. They were teachers helping their students discover their own potential. They've been watching us develop for 12,000 years, he said, understanding flooding through him. Not as jailers keeping us imprisoned, but as parents waiting for the right moment to introduce us to the larger family. The holographic display in the center of their circle suddenly expanded, no longer showing just mathematical equations, but revealing a three-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Hundreds of star systems were highlighted, each one representing a member species of the cognition web. But what took Marcus's breath away was seeing Earth's position in the map. Humanity wasn't on the outskirts of this galactic civilization. They were positioned at a crucial nexus point, connected to more member species than any other single world. Our location in the galaxy is strategically significant, Dr. Vasquez observed. We're positioned to serve as a communication hub between major web sectors. Chen Wei's quantum computing interface was processing the full implications of their position. More than that, the mathematical relationship suggests that human consciousness has unique properties that make us ideal translators between different types of awareness. We could help species that have had difficulty communicating with each other. Amara's electromagnetic abilities were detecting new signals from multiple star systems, all of them carrying similar mathematical structures to the message they'd been decoding. They're all trying to communicate with us. Multiple species, reaching out simultaneously. Robert Clearwater's consciousness touched the quantum threads connecting Earth to the various member worlds. We're not just being invited to join the web, we're being invited to take on a special role within it. As this understanding dawned on all of them, the alien mathematics in their shared holographic space began to sing. Not audible music, but harmonious patterns of pure meaning that conveyed joy, welcome, and anticipation. The evaluation is ending, Marcus realized. Not because we've passed or failed, but because we've grown beyond the need for evaluation. The robed figure from his original vision appeared again, but this time not as a distant presence in an impossible room. The entity stood among them in their communication circle, its form becoming clearer as their consciousness expanded to accommodate the contact. When it spoke, all 17 humans could hear and understand the communication perfectly. Welcome to the web, children of soul. Your species has been ready for this moment longer than you know. We have simply been waiting for you to discover your own readiness. The figure gestured to encompass all of them. You represent the bridge between your species' current understanding and the expanded awareness that awaits. But the choice of how to proceed remains entirely with humanity. Marcus felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders, but it no longer felt overwhelming. Looking around at his fellow quantum-sensitive humans, he saw the same determination and wonder reflected in their faces. What happens next? Dr. Vasquez asked. That, the entity replied with what Marcus somehow knew was a smile, is entirely up to you. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same dorm room where everything had begun, but the space had been transformed beyond recognition. The walls were now covered with equations that seemed to write themselves, mathematical expressions that bridged human understanding and web consciousness protocols. The room had become a living interface between Earth and the galactic community. Outside his window, the world was changing in ways both subtle and profound. The controlled revelation of humanity's connection to the cognition web had been carefully managed through existing governmental and academic institutions, but the effects rippled through every aspect of human society. Universities worldwide had established new departments of consciousness studies, where students learned to interface their awareness with quantum fields. Medical researchers were using web-guided techniques to accelerate healing and extend human lifespan. Engineers were developing technologies that responded directly to human thought and intention. But perhaps most importantly, humanity was learning to see itself as part of something vast and wonderful, rather than alone in an empty universe. Marcus's role had evolved far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. As humanity's primary consciousness translator, he spent his days facilitating communication between human researchers and web entities from across the galaxy. Each conversation brought new insights, new possibilities, and new challenges. "Marcus," came Chen Wei's voice through their permanent quantum communication link. "We're getting some interesting readings from the Centauri Collective. They want to share their atmospheric processing techniques, but they're having trouble translating the consciousness-directed chemistry concepts into terms our scientists can understand." Marcus smiled, closing his eyes and opening his awareness to the communication protocols they'd spent months perfecting. In seconds, he was in mental contact with beings whose consciousness existed partially in the atmosphere of a gas giant 4 light-years away. The translation process had become second nature to him now. He could feel the alien concepts, understand their mathematical beauty, and find ways to express them using the hybrid human web mathematics they'd developed together. "Tell Dr. Patterson's team to focus on molecular resonance patterns rather than traditional chemical bonds," Marcus communicated back to Chen Wei. "The Centauri work with atmospheric gases by convincing molecules to form temporary cooperative structures based on harmonic frequencies." Through his enhanced awareness, Marcus could feel the broader web responding to humanity's integration. The addition of human consciousness to the galactic community was creating new possibilities that none of the existing member species had anticipated. Humanity's unique position as consciousness translators had made them invaluable mediators between species that had struggled to communicate effectively for centuries. The mathematical frameworks Marcus and his colleagues had developed were being adopted throughout the web as universal communication protocols. But there was something even more significant happening. Human creativity and adaptability were inspiring evolutionary leaps in species that had become somewhat stagnant after millennia of stable web membership. The injection of fresh perspectives was revitalizing the entire galactic community. Dr. Vasquez materialized in his room through the quantum consciousness interface they'd installed in all their primary research locations. "Marcus, you need to see what Robert discovered during his meditation session with the crystal entities from Vega." She activated a holographic display that showed patterns of impossible beauty, mathematical structures that seemed to dance between dimensions. He found a way to combine human artistic sensibilities with their geometric consciousness. They've created something entirely new, a form of mathematics that's simultaneously logical and emotionally resonant. Marcus studied the patterns, feeling his consciousness resonate with their harmony. This could revolutionize how the web approaches problem solving. Instead of purely logical analysis, they could incorporate emotional and aesthetic dimensions. "That's exactly what they're thinking," Dr. Vasquez confirmed. 5 different species have already requested consultation sessions to explore how human artistic consciousness might enhance their own development processes. Through his connection to the web, Marcus could sense the ripple effects of humanity's contributions spreading throughout the galactic community. Species that hadn't communicated in centuries were rediscovering shared interests. Research projects that had been stalled for millennia were suddenly making breakthrough progress. But perhaps most remarkably, individual web entities were beginning to explore concepts that had been purely human until now. Humor, music, storytelling, and the kind of creative leaps that came from refusing to accept that something was impossible. "There's something else," Dr. Vasquez added. "The Web Council wants to discuss expanding humanity's role beyond consciousness translation. They're proposing that we become coordinators for cross-species creative collaboration projects." Marcus felt a thrill of excitement and responsibility. From a college student struggling with mysterious equations to a coordinator of galactic civilization in less than a year, the transformation seemed impossible, but he could feel its reality in every quantum interaction. What would that involve? Basically, we'd become the web's Department of Innovation and Creative Problem Solving. When member species encounter challenges that require new approaches, they'd work with human consciousness translators to explore solutions that none of them could develop alone. Marcus opened his awareness fully to the web, feeling the vast community of consciousness that now included humanity, billions of individual minds across hundreds of worlds, all connected by the fundamental understanding that consciousness itself was the most powerful force in the universe. And at the center of it all, 17 humans who had chosen to represent their species, not through competition or dominance, but through cooperation and service. "Tell the council we accept," Marcus said, "but with one condition." "What's that?" Marcus looked out his window at the campus where normal human students were going about their daily lives, most of them still unaware of the cosmic community their species had joined. "We want to establish training programs to identify and develop more quantum-sensitive humans. 17 consciousness translators aren't enough to serve a galactic community. We need to find and train others." Dr. Vasquez smiled. "Actually, that's already happening. Professor Williams estimates that the consciousness damper's controlled shutdown is creating approximately 50 new quantum-sensitive individuals per month. By next year, we should have active translation teams on every continent." Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he contemplated humanity's future. From a species isolated by necessity to become the creative catalyst for an entire galactic civilization, it was more than anyone had dared to dream. But as he looked at the self-writing equations on his walls, Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The web itself was evolving, growing more complex and capable with each new connection, each creative breakthrough, each moment of understanding shared between vastly different forms of consciousness. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said to Dr. Vasquez. "We're not just joining something that already existed, we're helping to create something entirely new." Outside his window, the stars seemed to shimmer with anticipation, as if the universe itself was excited to see what humanity would help create next. Marcus closed his eyes, opened his consciousness to the web, and began working on mathematical frameworks that didn't yet exist but soon would, born from the infinite creativity that emerged when different forms of awareness chose to work together. In the end, the FBI hadn't been focused on a brilliant student because he was dangerous. They'd been focused on him because he was the key to humanity's greatest adventure, not conquering the galaxy, but helping it discover new ways to grow, create, and become more than any single species could achieve alone. The boy who had once worried about passing calculus had become a bridge between worlds, and through his work humanity had found its true calling among the stars.